Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and I teach watercolor tutorials, a new one every week, and sometimes we have a bonus, like this succulent. Ooh. So this is just a fun bonus project. It is not part of a subscription, but you know, I like to give you guys some fun projects on the side. We are going to do this project in 5 steps. So our very first step is we are going to do a light wash across all of our succulent. Would these be considered succulent petals?
No, they're leaves.
Succulent leaves. Second step, we will do a medium value wash. Third step, we'll be putting in our little purple tips. Fourth step, we'll do dark values. And fifth step, wait, yeah, I counted that right. Fifth step is details. I have my husband, Michael, who's filming with me. He'll tell me where to look.
Hello, everybody.
And fun facts, because he studied biology in college, so he knows a lot more than I do about plants. And our son Arlo is sleeping in the back.
So I'm gonna whisper the whole time.
I'll try and talk quietly, not laugh so loud. We are using 2 paintbrushes today, our round 6 and our round 2. I've named them. This one is Keenan and the small one is Brock. You guys don't have to name yours, or you can name yours whatever you want. We are using 4 colors in this project. Our first color is magenta. Our second color is azure blue. Our third color is lemon yellow. Oh, I still have blue on my brush, can you tell?
A little bit. It's like highlighter yellow now.
Yeah. And our last color is black. Now, if you guys are just starting and you're not sure what colors to get, I highly recommend starting with a color palette that is very similar to this, because as you can see, even though we're working and painting with desaturated greens and purples, and we're not using any of those colors, you can mix a lot of colors with these 4. So if you're looking for a place to start, these 4 colors are a great place to get you started. Warm-ups, there's nothing special. We will be working on values, which is all about the lightness and darkness of a color. If you're not entirely sure what that means, you can refer to our beginner series videos where I go over that. We are also working on the wet on dry technique, which is about building up layers to create form. Again, if you're not familiar, you can watch that beginner series, but I will obviously show you as I'm doing it. But if you need a little more information, you guys can access that. Okay, let's outline and then we'll do our oath and then we'll get started. So here is an outline with this project. What I like to do when I do my outlines is I like to tape it down to my paper, because when you're tracing and it moves, it's really hard to get it back in the spot that you need it to. So I'm just going to tape that. And I need graphite paper, and you do dark shiny side down. And remember, graphite paper is reusable and it actually gets better with age, so do not throw it away after a one-time use. And then whatever mark you make on your paper, that is what is going to show up underneath. And I always like to do one and then test and see. That's fairly dark. I'm going to try and lighten it up just a little bit. For you guys at home, I would suggest trying to go as light as possible where you can still see what's going on, because watercolor is transparent. And so if you trace this really dark, then you're going to see all the lines underneath. Okay, I'm just going to, okay, now I think that's, if I was just at home by myself not filming, this would be a really great lightness, but because I want to make sure you guys can see what I'm doing on camera, I'm going to darken this, okay? But that's a good darkness. And if you're not sure how to make it lighter or darker, it's just about the pressure of your drawing utensil. I also have dashed lines here as solid lines, so I wanted to communicate that the dashes are kind of more where there are value changes, or like shadows or highlights. And the straight edges are kind of more where there's actual edges. And you guys don't have to do the dashed lines if you don't want to. I just don't, I like giving you guys outlines, because then if you don't feel confident drawing, you still have the opportunity to paint. I don't want your, I don't want that to stop you from actually painting. But also, I don't want you to feel like outlines are like coloring books or these rigid lines. They're more of a guideline for you guys, and it's okay to kind of deviate from them depending on what you think your painting needs. There we go. Michael, do you know any fun facts about succulents?
Succulents and cactuses use a special type of photosynthesis called CAM, which is interesting. It's much more efficient regarding CO2.
CAM?
Yeah, CAM photosynthesis.
How is it different than regular photosynthesis?
Man, you really put me on the spot. It's been years here. So how photosynthesis usually works is a plant will grab a carbon dioxide molecule and then use really specialized organelles inside of their cell to trap sunlight, which breaks apart the carbon-oxygen bond, and it uses that carbon to make sugar for its own food, and then it releases the oxygen back into the air for us to breathe. Regular plants, using like C4 photosynthesis, I'm pretty sure it's C4. It could be C3. It's been a while.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot
Here,
like this.
anyways, so a regular plant, when it's grabbing that CO2 molecule and it's using its chloroplast to break it apart, it's very inefficient. And so, like, every one in, let's call it 4, these are just made up numbers. The CO2 doesn't get broken apart and the plant just goes, bail, and throws the whole thing.
Okay.
CAM photosynthesis, which is adapted from desert plants and things that have, like, very sparse access to water,
They have to be efficient in order
method.
to survive.
Yep,
Okay,
pretty much.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Why are succulents so hard to keep alive is really what I would like to know.
Succulents are the easiest plant to
They
keep
are
alive.
not.
They are.
I don't believe that for a second.
We had succulents upstairs that couldn't die. They just, like, you'd put them in the closet and they would just branch out.
I have killed every succulent I've ever owned.
What plant had you kept alive?
Not one. I think the snake plant in my office is still doing okay. I watered it last week.
It's because I check on it.
It's true. It's true. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we have our thing tree. Oh, the oath. Our oath. If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
And I love starting with that because we get so much in our head when we're starting something new, and it becomes like this thing of like, I mean, I remember doing it too, especially when I first started art school, of being like, when we would do group paintings and like kind of like hiding mine unless I was super proud of it, you know what I mean? But like always looking to see and like ranking myself within everybody in the class. It's a very natural thing to do, but when we only focus on that, we lose the opportunity to have joy. So I just want you guys to focus on the ability to create something regardless of whether it's the most amazing thing or not, simply because the act of creating is fun. That's it.
I gotta tell you, I lie when I take that oath when I paint with you. I'm sad the whole time comparing mine to yours. I gotta come clean.
You can't lie. That's
No.
the whole point of an oath.
I know.
You gotta,
I'll be better.
So, okay, so we're gonna start by putting down our lightest wash first. So I'm gonna mix like a light green. So I'm gonna take some azure blue and some lemon yellow. But you'll notice that this green is really, really vibrant because we're working with really vibrant colors. So a way to desaturate the colors is to add its complement or to add black, pretty much. So I usually like to add a complement, but sometimes I'll do both depending on how the color mixing is going. So right now I have green. The complement of green is red. Magenta is acting as our red. So I'm gonna grab some magenta and throw that in there. And already you can see this green is graying down, which is more true to a succulent color. Sometimes succulents are vibrant, but some of them always have that kind of gray, blue, green color. That's really beautiful. I feel really good about that color, actually. So I'm gonna bring a little bit of water to it because I want this to be really light. And I'm gonna start with my first layer.
I should have saved that photosynthesis fact for the when you're painting all of these leaves.
Why?
I don't know. I just feel like we need like a little space filler there.
Well, we needed a space filler when we were outlining.
That's true. That's a great green.
Isn't that a good? And also, you guys, you can kind of switch it up as you go. Like, let's say you thought that this green looked really nice, and then you put it on your painting, and you're like, oh gosh, that is way more vibrant than I thought. Well, then just stop painting with it and adjust the color and then put it back. And we're doing so many layers that you probably won't even really be able to tell that green. Also, my reference photos colors is slightly cooler than what I'll be painting, and that's mostly because I printed this from my home computer because our printer wasn't working here, so at work. So that's why the colors are off. And usually, I mean, the printing company we work with tries really hard to match colors, but making reproductions of paintings matching colors is super, super difficult. So we do the best we can, but sometimes the colors are just slightly off. And also we mix a lot together, and so that could be why colors are off too. I mean, your green probably looks different because the ratios of colors will probably be a little bit different. And that's okay. I like to teach that way because I think that, one, it's valuable to learn how to mix colors, and two, I want you to embrace what you make and let go of the expectation that everything you make has to look exactly like something else.
We've talked about this in a previous tutorial. I think it's so funny how advanced we are as a species and how hard it still is to get your printer to print the correct color. Because like me and you have sat at your printer for hours trying to get the right, and it's just like, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's so hard, especially with like reds is actually just a super difficult color in general.
And black.
Blacks. It's really hard.
The black is always like blue. It always has like some weird undertone you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, come on, scientists.
Scientists. You're a scientist.
Don't look at me.
That's what you should do. What are you doing making videos? I need you to focus on printing technology, please.
Anyways, I think it's a problem in the professional printing world too. I don't think it's just us.
Yeah, my dad actually was in the printing world for a really long time, and I mean, that was a lot of his job, was like reproducing printing and color matching and things like that, and it's hard. Okay, that's it. That's our first step. As you can see, I did more of an even wash. I was kind of messy with it because it's just our first layer. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to just be a little bit loose and just go with it. Now, I'm going to let that dry and mix my next batch of value. So you can see, can they see my full palette? Here is where I was pulling from because this is where I added the water, so this was my lightest value. And then here is a darker value, and you can always test to see, like, let's say you want to test to see how the values compare before you lay it down. You can take your scratch paper. There's the color that we put down for our first layer, and then here's the more mixed. So you can see the value difference right here. I would say that's a good jump between light and medium. So I'm going to use this, but I'll need to make more because that is not enough paint to do all my values. So I'm going to pull in some blue, I'm going to pull in some yellow, I'm going to pull in some more magenta. Okay, and that's pretty dark. So then I'm just going to lighten it. And then the other thing that happens sometimes when you pull in too much of a color is that it actually goes too desaturated. Like, look how gray that green looks compared to this one. If that happens to you, don't stress. You just add more color to it. There's more blue, there's more yellow. So really just play with what you like. And the other fun thing about being an artist is, even though like sometimes we really want to color match to what we see in person, it's actually really fun to be able to like make those decisions as a creator and be like, yeah, I know that succulents are usually this kind of green, but I want my greens to be super vibrant. You have that right to do that. Like, you are the one creating this. So, you know, it's important to allow yourself to have a personal preference when you're making stuff. So I got more of a green, a darker value green here that I feel good about. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start, so all of these leaves originate from the center. They're all pulling out from the center, which means that when we add our medium values, the darker values are gonna be closest to the center, and then it's gonna be lighter values on the edge. And that is because it's coming out from something that's like on top, so it's kind of growing underneath, which means whatever is on top is casting a shadow of what's coming out underneath. And also the edges are going to be more like the light source is going to hit the edges more than like these creases right here where they're coming out and shadows are being cast on them. So whenever you're adding value, you always want to start where like the shadow is going to be darkest and then work out from there. So dang, that AC
There's our friend, the air conditioner.
We should name him.
I'll think about it.
You think of a name.
Grover.
Rover?
Grover.
Grover. Well, there's Grover saying hi. Hopefully he won't stick around too long. Okay, so you can start anywhere. It doesn't really matter which leaf you start at. I'm gonna start here. So I just paint the crevice. And I always like to put my color down first and do like a little section, and then grab some water, hit it on my paper towel so it's not too wet, and then start blending out. And this dotted line is kind of me saying that this is kind of where the shadow transitions to the lighter value. But don't do a hard stop there, okay? You really want to transition, have it go like a seamless. We don't want like super, like hard lines. The other thing about succulents is their leaves kind of curve. They're not totally flat. They have a little bit of dimension to them by themselves. So you'll see here, like especially on like this one and this one, is they kind of fold in the center, which is why we kind of have more of a center crease right here, because it's folded and the light is hitting the either sides of that one leaf differently. Now the other thing about succulent leaves, depending on the succulent, I should say, is that they're really thick and they kind of have a lip to them, which is why I have these kind of lips left, like an edge left, because they kind of come out and fold in and they have a really thick edge. So that's why we're leaving that kind of highlighted. If the leaves were really thin, then there would not be that edge. Okay, does that make sense?
They're swollen with water.
Really? So if your succulent is about to die, it's gonna feel thin or no?
They don't feel thin, they look like your hands after the bath.
Oh,
they like
okay.
wrinkle up. You've seen it after you murdered your succulents, you know what I'm talking about.
I didn't mean to. I try hard. I need to like set alarms or something, or I don't know.
Think about plants. This is for all you lovelies out there in Llama Land. I think the less you kind of care about them, the better off. I mean, care, but secretly care. Play hard to get with your plants.
It's like with our paintings when you're like, pretend like you don't care about this painting.
That's exactly what plants are like. If you're like on a schedule watering them or like very strict about it, that's when they tend to fall apart.
Well, you're on a schedule to water our plants.
I'm on a very loose schedule.
Yeah,
I usually feel them every day. And then end up watering about once a week.
So you do have to care about them, like you have to check on them regularly.
Let them know that you care.
But you can't be like all over them.
You smother them to death.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. I've done that with my fish too, where I overfed it and it died.
Want some more fun plant facts while we're doing this step?
Yeah, I just want to say, you guys, that basically what I did in this first leaf, I'm just gonna repeat across a thing. So it might seem like we're kind of chatting and not, but it's a repeated step over and over again. So that's why I'm just gonna let you guys go at your own pace. And if there's any new information that I think of, I will say it. Okay, go for it, my dear.
All right, so again, a little rusty, so I'll probably get some of this wrong, but in plants, you know how like the center is always like this small tiny leaves? It seems like everything's growing from the center?
Yeah.
Okay, so that point is called an apical meristem, okay?
Wait, apical meristem.
Meristem is a term, apical is a location.
Okay.
Okay, so from that point, it's just essentially a little glob of stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
And it prints the plant. The plant grows down. The stem cells always live on the topmost point and grow the plant under it. I don't know how to describe what I'm saying.
What?
Like it prints a new leaf and then it gets higher and higher.
Okay, that makes sense because when you think of plants, you think of roots, so everything goes from the root. But what you're saying is with this...
Plants have their own meristems that print roots out.
Okay.
The top of a plant has a meristem. It's like when you think of like a fresh baby leaf on a plant.
Yeah.
And it's like growing up.
Yeah.
The top of the leaf is always moving. It goes and forms the next thing. It's like a glob of stem cells that always lives on the plant. If you cut the meristem off of a plant, it can't grow anymore. It will make a new meristem. It'll shoot out of a different node. But like that meristem is what makes the plant.
Is that why you get mad at me when I trim, like take pieces of your plants for pictures?
Yeah, you're killing all the meristems off of them. And then
He gets so mad at me.
It's really expensive for the plant to make a new meristem off of a node because it has to do all of this essentially thinking, which is hard for plants to do. It has to decide, where am I going to put this? How am I going to grow it?
Oh, we got a little fly friend. That one's Fred. That's Fred the fly. He'll come in and out. Okay. Is this true for all plants?
I'm sure there are exceptions because that's how everything always goes, but most plants, yes.
Okay, so then when you're trimming a plant, like, you usually want to go for like, because you trim, okay, but you only trim off like dead parts because the plant is spending so much energy trying to keep those dead parts alive that it's taken away from everything else. That's why you want to trim off the parts that are kind of dying.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's another technique. Some people call it like pinching or nipping, but like if you're growing an herb and you plant the seed, it grows up in a straight shaft.
Okay.
If you pinch off the meristem of that shaft, it will pump out other meristems and it'll make it bushier because it won't just grow straight up. It'll have different directions now. And then if you pinch those and then the next ones you pinch those, the plant then has like 20 meristems going at once and it can make a bushier plant.
Okay, so that you could also use that as a way to like change the shape of your plant, pretty much.
If you pinch off too soon, the roots don't have enough structure to support multiple meristems because they're very expensive.
Expensive in terms of energy.
Yeah, a plant's energy is sugar. So a plant, again, back to photosynthesis, makes sugar from the sun and oxygen. All of that sugar essentially goes into either storage or into new leaf growth to those meristems.
Okay.
Did that make sense? Am I confusing everybody?
It did make sense. Is there any way to know if you were to like cut off a section and it makes more meristems? Is there any way, like, is there a standard of how many grow? Like, how many new meristems come? Does a plant just decide? Okay.
So when you look at a plant, most times it's either underneath a leaf or right above a leaf. There's tiny little white dots on plants. They're called nodes. Those are undifferentiated cells. So when something happens to a plant, it does like a little sensing of how many nodes it has. It tries to guess which one is in the best position based on sunlight and all these things, but it can't really know. It picks the one that it chooses is the best and turns that into the thing, the meristem.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes it does one, sometimes it'll do two. It just depends what the plant decides.
So there's always this like accidental element with plants too of like, what's going to happen with you, little guy? Like,
yeah.
how are you going to grow? And
That's why bonsai is such a cool form, because it's essentially forcing a tree to do exactly what you want.
Oh.
They'll trim a meristem to make a branch grow in a very specific spot. And you can like trick the plant into doing it with techniques I don't know.
Okay, okay.
Probably whispering it.
So bonsai, singing it songs and bringing it cookies. So bonsai is almost like an art form where people are really aware of how they want it to look and grow, and they make those things really purposeful depending on how they want it to grow.
I think the problem with bonsai is you assume that it's those tiny little trees that you get at Lowe's, but like real bonsai is highly curated. You know what I mean? It's very controlled, where like the Lowe's ones, they just trim the roots to keep them small, and people are like, oh, bonsai means small.
Oh, it doesn't mean small.
No, bonsai is like a highly controlled art form.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, you could really geek out about bonsai trees.
I'm surprised you have not gotten into it.
The ones I want are $3,000 or $4,000.
Oh, I am grateful that you have not gotten into it. Okay, and you guys, I haven't done the center leaves yet because I know it gets a little bit confusing in there. So don't stress about those yet. I will talk you through those ones. I'm getting pretty close to putting my medium value down, and as you can see, this is kind of where our plant starts to, or our painting starts to create a little bit of form. Because we're putting in those different values, things are receding, things are popping up. Putting in my medium and darker values when I'm painting is so fun, because that's when it starts to pop. Okay. So I'm going in on my center leaves here. Now this is, and you can switch to your round two if you'll be able to control that value and transition easier. So I'm going to put in my darker values here, and it's really just, it's the same thing but just on a smaller scale. But sometimes the areas are so small that it gets hard to fully transition those. Arlo woke up. Did they hear him? His little talking.
Maybe he's grunting.
So just do the best that you can. Honestly, if you look on the very center of these, there's not a strong value change as much as on these larger ones, and that's mostly because it's harder to do that on a tiny level. And also because the things are so tiny themselves that they don't have as much transition because they are so much smaller.
I love how you can guess the form of those leaves just by leaving a light edge around them.
Yeah. It's funny, I had this moment when I was in, and it might seem like such a duh thing, but it was like this light bulb moment for me where a teacher asked, like, how do you communicate the texture of something when you're painting? And it is all about how the light hits it. That's everything. And then, but that's actually true for every form, how we communicate texture, how we communicate the shape of it. Like, it is really how the light hits it. And so if you guys are really interested in becoming and like making your own artwork and like really pursuing this seriously and really improving your artistic skills, then I would highly encourage you, and I know it sounds silly, look at how light hits everything. That, just staring at things for what they are instead of what your brain tells them that they are, is the biggest way to improve your skill, because so much of painting and drawing is drawing and painting what our eye sees and not what our brain tells us we see, because our brain is efficient just like a plant, where it automatically assumes things, where it's just like, that's a lamp, that's a table, that's a hand, and it just like gives us that information. But if you take the time to approach it as, I'm going to pretend this isn't a lamp and pretend like I've never seen this before. How is that light hitting the metallic edge of that lamp? How is the light going around the fingers and the wrinkles of this hand? And that is the best way for you to learn how to capture what's happening and will transform your paintings or drawings. Okay. Okay, so we got our medium values down. That was step 2. Now we're going to move on to step 3, and we're going to do our purple tips, because some succulents have little purple edges, right? Yeah. Okay, so to mix my purple, I'm going to grab magenta and azure. And you guys can decide like the type of purple it is, if it's more of a pink purple or more of a blue purple. And also, again, I want to tone down this purple because our green is kind of toned, and if I put in bright purple, then that would be like, whoa. So the opposite of purple is yellow. So I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow and add that to the mix. If you do too much yellow, it will turn your purple brown. If that happens, just throw in more magenta and blue, and it will bring that purple back up.
I got a fun question.
Sure.
So you're like secondary colors that you have to mix to get.
Yeah.
Is there some that are more difficult to achieve than others in your experience? Would you say that like it's really hard to get a green, or like are they all about the same?
They're all about the same, but actually it depends on the temperatures of colors that you are mixing. For example, if you want to mix a purple, but you have like a cooler red, and by, how do I say this? Okay, if your red is more of an orange red and you mix blue with that orange red, it is difficult to get a vibrant purple. That purple is going to be muddy. If you have more of a pink red and you mix that, or a pink or purple red, and you mix that with your blue, you're going to get a better purple. So it kind of depends. That's where it gets difficult, is knowing the temperatures of your colors to be able to mix the kind of colors that you want to achieve. And I think we actually have created a graphic in our Facebook group called, our Facebook group is Let's Make Art Watercolor, and we kind of have the color spectrum, and we pinpoint where there are cool and warm, and we kind of explain it a little bit more. It's very helpful. But if that is something that's frustrating to you, it's understandable, because it's not like if you use any red and any blue, you're going to mix the perfect purple. That's not how it works. There are subcolors within colors that make mixing harder or easier. Was that okay? So I have my purple, and I'm just going to paint the tip, and I'm using my 2, and then I dampen my brush, hit it on my paper towel, and kind of blend out. Now, I don't want to blend too far, okay, because I want the purple to stay on the tips. If I want a color or a value to stay in an area, I will then blend up instead of blend down. Does that make sense? And the same is true when actually I'm doing like my values. If I want a value to stay in an area, I'll blend towards that value instead of away from it, because then it will keep it close.
That's a real pro tip. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah. And then if you guys want to drop, you guys can decide how purpley you want your tips to be, how far it goes out. Again, plants are super amazing where it differs. It depends on the plant itself. And also, I kind of switched up how much the tip is purple across these leaves, because I don't want it to feel all the same exactly on everyone. So on some of them, like this one here, I just did a tiny little tip. And I didn't really blend it out that much like these, because I want there to be variation within my leaves as well. Now I'm sure out there is a plant that has the perfect transition of colors, tips on all the leaves, and if that's what you want to paint, more power to you. You have that right. I just like to mix it up. And isn't it funny how just that added pink just like brings something to this? I love it. Or added purple, I guess I should say. I guess I should name the correct colors, since, you know, I'm teaching how to paint it.
Color ain't nothing but a thing, you know?
Yeah. What I find also fascinating when it comes to colors is how much it varies between person to person, because there are people who are colorblind. There are people who have a hard time seeing some colors more than others. Some people actually have more like cones in their eyes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that make it easier to see more colors or more range of colors. It's all so fascinating.
Do you remember that podcast about
Yes.
those women who could see an extra color?
Yes.
What do they call it? I feel like they're called like super seers or something.
I can't remember.
Anyways, it's a Radiolab podcast, and it's very fascinating.
Yeah. And wasn't there, I feel like there was something special about the color blue where there's this whole community of people who didn't have the color blue
Oh my gosh,
in
we're
there.
going to fall down this rabbit hole. This
Okay.
is the same Radiolab podcast.
It is.
I'll summarize for you.
Okay.
Like, essentially, ancient cultures did not have names for blue. Think about you as a child, okay?
Okay.
You learn the basic names of colors. You learn red, yellow, blue, green. You know those, but you don't know what chartreuse means. You don't know what these like advanced colors. So in your head, you don't differentiate them. When you see that color, you just see blue.
Mm-hmm.
These ancient cultures and all of their writings, they called the sea the color of wine. They like didn't have the name for blue. They just kind of grouped it onto this like gray, kind of deep reddish color. And this, I mean, and the obvious question was like, what about the sky? It's blue.
Yeah.
But it's the only thing they had, and it was so prevalent that your mind kind of blocks it off. So the discovery of blue in all human writing kind of happens at a very specific point where people started to name the different blues.
That is so wild.
Then they were able to see them.
That is so wild. I can't, like, my mind just... Michael, you have to find... Do you think you can find the name of that podcast so we could tell people?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a radio lab. I'll look it up and I'll put it on screen right now. There it is.
Because I mean, we listened to that years and years ago, but it was so incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, also the woman who could see multiple colors, your eye has receptors for I think 3 colors. Like green and red. I don't know. This is me going into territory I'm not sure of. But
Okay.
she has a receptor for a different color. And it's rare, but multiple people have it, I think. And so she can see like this transition color that we have no idea what it even looks like.
Wow. Well, and you know what? I think I can understand where this is true because, like, I know, maybe you guys have experienced this yourself, where if you looked at a red, you'd be like, oh, that color is red. But the more you look at reds, you're like, you know what? That color is red, but it actually has an orange tint to it. Or that color is red, but it actually has like purple undertones to it. And the more you look at that and the more you like vocalize the difference, the more it becomes easier to see the differences between all of these colors. So like the fact that, you know, that this was a color that they didn't have a name for and therefore like wasn't part of their thing, I can see how it just was like kind of glossed over because it's easy, because again, our brain is so smart and efficient that it's like, okay, well, you don't need to know what that color is. That doesn't really exist. So we're just gonna like move past it. It's this gray color or whatever. And then it's when you stop and look at it that you're like, wait, no, there's differences here.
They go a lot into the rarity of color too. Blue, for example. Blue is the rarest flower color. There's a lot of like very purpley flowers that look kind of blue. There's a lot of, but a true blue flower is very rare. And if you think of natural things when you're walking in the forest, how many of them are blue? None.
Yeah.
It's just, it was so cool. And so they talked about how like these rare colors became like royal colors. Like purple is also very rare. And so like when they sourced purple dye, that's why, you know, purple is associated with royalty because it was so expensive and hard to find.
Because it's not easy to find in nature, so
Yeah.
therefore it's harder to find things to make pigment.
I think it's crushed up seashells or something how they made purple. I don't know, but it's like very hard to do.
That's so cool. Okay, we are totally geeking out about colors,
Color
you guys.
is so cool.
Okay, I finished my 3rd step, and now it is time to move on to my 4th step, which is putting in my darker values. Because even though I have form here, I feel like I can make it even more dimensional by having a darker value in there. So it should be dry. And one more thing that I want to tell you guys, because this was a question that came up and I've answered it before, but sometimes when you're doing layering, especially layering different values, if you're putting a layer down and it's actually picking up the color and not getting darker, you are using too much water on your brush, or your painting is not fully dry. So if that is happening to you, hit your paintbrush on your paper towel a couple of times before you lay that darker value down, because water does lift up color in watercolor. So that could be what's happening, or you just need to let your painting dry a little bit more. So, okay. I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker value. So I'm going to grab, because I pretty much used all of it for the medium, grab some blue. Nope, not ready yet for the magenta. Grab some yellow. I got my green. And this is where I'm going to maybe add a little bit of black. Now, I don't want to go too crazy with the black, because if I go a bit too crazy with the black, then it's going to look very gray. So, but maybe you guys have already utilized the black to this point. You absolutely can. It's totally up to you. I kind of put it in there as like a safety in case you were having a really hard time getting a desaturated green. Okay, so this is like a really gorgeous, oh yeah, look at that. That's pretty.
That's pretty.
That's pretty right there.
Missouri.
I like that it has like slightly blue undertones to it. I think that is really lovely, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, and then I'm just going to, again, pretty much repeat my second step, which is start at the corners here, or kind of where they're coming out. Dampen my brush, hit it on my paper towel so it's not super wet, and blend.
Dang, that's awesome.
Isn't that a gorgeous color?
Yes.
And then also you'll notice here that I have some shadows that are actually kind of near the top, and that's because we want to communicate that there's an edge, that these are thick leaves. And so sometimes just adding a little bit of a shadow at the top will even communicate that further.
Wait, what kind of leaves are they?
What?
Thick.
Oh, because these leaves are thick.
There it is.
Now, the other thing that I want to mention too is, even though this rim is going to be highlighted because it's popping out, there will still be a shadow on it coming out from underneath this plant. So you can see I've left it alone from our first layer. Now is when I'm just going to do a light wash across it. And it just will push it underneath this edge right here, which is what we want because it's underneath that edge. And you guys, I can't see your painting. And so you guys can decide if maybe you did your values a little bit darker than I did, and you don't have to, you're like, actually, this is, the dimension is there, the dark values are there, my highlights are there. I don't know if I need to do so many layers. That is just great. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe on the flip side, you do this third wash, and especially if you're a little bit lighter hand with your colors, you might have to do another layer too. And there's nothing wrong with that. Marlo's just talking.
He's playing with his toes.
It is the cutest things when babies hold on to their toes. I just can't handle it.
When I lay on my back and play with my feet, it's weird.
I used to do yoga, and there's like this pose called Happy Baby, and you lay on your back and you like hold onto your toes and you kind of like go back and forth on your back. It's really wonderful, but it is funny how like weird it feels sometimes to be in baby positions. I don't know if there's a better way to explain that, but it's really good for your back.
I was just watching something on Netflix, and I think the yoga boom is attributed to Madonna.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, this could be totally not correct, but I think she talked about like she started doing it in the 80s and it just took off.
Madonna.
I wonder what her real name is.
I bet you can Google it.
Her first name is Madonna.
Is it really?
Yeah, Madonna Louise Sissone.
Did she have it legally changed?
Maybe.
Because, I mean, maybe
No, that's it.
that's amazing. That mother knew that this child was going to be something. You know what I mean? Okay. Now, something else that might be frustrating to you guys is, as you can see that these are drying. Are you doing? Is this on close up?
Yeah.
So they can. You might notice some of these blooms that are happening within my color transitions. Now, this is going to be. This is. How do I say this? Canson paper tends to bloom a little bit more than other paper. That's just the nature of it. I enjoy blooms, so it doesn't bother me, and that is why Canson is my preferred paper when I'm painting items. But if it's really frustrating to you and you want to kind of like blend them out, what I'll do is after it dries, I'll just take a damp brush and kind of just work the edges where those blooms are happening. Now, I do want to warn you though, that if I were to just like brush it out right here, it would just create another bloom because blooms happen from different drying times. So you got to make sure that you kind of like run it across the entire thing with the hope that it kind of dries evenly, and that's how you can smooth out some of those bloom edges. And again, it's just going to be kind of the same repeated step on all of this. Now, if you really enjoy this type of painting, which is doing light washes and layers and building it up, then I would also suggest using hot press watercolor paper. And if you are a July subscriber, you actually have a little sample of both, so you guys can try those. But basically, the difference between cold press and hot press is cold press has a texture to it. It's toothier, which the point of that is it kind of shows the grain, the pigments a little bit better in paints, and it creates more blooms and stuff. Hot press is a smooth texture finish, and it does really well if you want to do more realistic style paintings, because it will just look smoother. Does that make sense? Because it's a smoother paper finish, it's gonna have smoother transitions and things like that. So I personally am not a huge fan of hot press paper. But that doesn't mean that you can't be. So if you wanted to give it a try and see if you kind of like that finish a little bit better, give it a go. This is not my usual standard way that I paint things, but I think it's really valuable to learn that there are a lot of different ways and techniques that can be used to paint different things, and I want to show you all your options, because I think some people choose to give up quickly thinking that like painting is not for them, when really it's because maybe they like to spend a lot of time on a painting and do layers and, you know, build it up and be patient, where I usually tend to just like have it in one go in like an hour. And so then they think that they're doing something wrong, and it's not that at all. It's just different painting styles. Now, the other interesting thing that you might notice is, even though we laid down a light value at the beginning, the light green, compared to the dark value, it might even start to look white, like the paper, which, first of all, is a super interesting lesson in how values inform each other by itself. But if you start to notice that and you think that your edges on your succulent leaves are too white, that they're popping out more than they should, that the painting starts to feel disjointed, you guys can do a quick wash across those if you want. Again, that's only if you like see that it's distracting from what's happening. And do not make that decision unless you like step away from your painting and look far away at it, because when you're this close to your painting, it is really hard to actually see what's going on in terms of form. Gosh, I feel like I've been talking so much this entire time. It's weird to be just quiet.
I feel the same. I'm giving people a biology break.
I know. Maybe it's okay just to let it be quiet just for a minute.
I'm changing the AC's name from Grover to Oscar, because Oscar the Grouch. That's what I was going for initially.
Okay. So the AC's name is officially Oscar. I think it stopped, right? It's off now.
No, your brain is just blocking it out.
Really? Wow, that's weird. Oh,
I think there's got to be multiple for this building.
there are multiple Oscars happening. Okay, the other thing that I was going to tell you guys is we're doing a lot of color transitions. We're doing a lot of different values and stuff like that. But our edges might not be totally clean between them. So here's the thing with outlining. Sometimes outlining things can be helpful. Sometimes though, it can completely flatten your edge and make whatever you just painted, like whatever form you just painted, seem flatter. So sometimes I'll do it, but I want to caution you guys to know that there's kind of like a price to pay. Gosh, I feel kind of a little like doom and gloom saying that. But like, for example,
Little Mermaid witchy.
yeah, like I'm Ursula right now. Okay, for example, if you're looking at this little leaf right here, there's not a totally clean edge, right? There's a lot of different things going on, which is true to form, but sometimes it makes us lose what's happening and it can be confusing. So if that happens, what you could do is you can just like take a like lighter or medium value and just kind of make that edge clean. Now again, if you do this with a super dark value, it will stick out and it kind of will like, I don't know, just, I don't know how to fully say what I'm saying, but like use it, but use it wisely and use it softly at first. Like even now, because I did that, I'm having to build up the shadow around it a little bit more so it doesn't feel disjointed from the rest. Okay, but now that looks like a lot cleaner of an edge and very clear. Here's one section, here's one section. So you can use that, use it wisely. And the other thing too is that these leaves that are going to be like, let's say they're the ones that are super underneath, the value on those should be a little bit darker, just generally, because they're what's farthest away from us. And when you want to push something back in a painting, you make it a darker value That is not true for landscapes. And I know that that's confusing. But basically, like when you're trying to create form within a short scope, things that are a darker value get pushed back. When you're trying to create a huge scope of depth, then things that are farther away are actually a lighter value and less contrasty. Does that make sense?
I think you're illustrating the differences between reflection and diffusion.
Talk more.
When you're looking at something up close, things that are closer to you are usually lighter because they're reflecting light more intensely to your eyeball than the things that are further back. When you get into landscapes, you're having the light and form diffused by the air between you and the thing, and
Yes.
it just turns into a light value.
Yes. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Arlo's trying to add his 2 cents in too.
He has a lot of knowledge that he would like to share. I love it when he talks.
He's just grinning. He's grinning like a fool, just chatting.
Can they hear him pretty good?
Probably.
So again, I'm just kind of going across all of my individual leaves, giving them all a little bit of love and attention in this value. And again, if you got to do a couple layers, there's nothing wrong with that. It's getting to the point where I'm like, okay, did I already do this little leaf? I'm not sure. But I'll do it anyway because he needs a little bit of attention. And that's what I mean with like your painting will inform you as you go. It doesn't have to be like only touch each leaf exactly 3 times. It doesn't work like that.
I like your robot lady voice.
And again, now I'm getting to the middle. And again, I've talked about how sometimes the middle can be a little bit harder. I'm going to switch to my 2 and just try and repeat it. Again, it's on a smaller scale, so it's harder to get that change. And also they're just shorter in general, so it's not going to have as much of a range. Oh, one other note about hot press paper is I like to paint in the way that I like to put my dark value down first and blend out. Pretty much, I mean, even how I'm adding layers of value, I do the same thing. Hot press paper, that is not the best way to work. You really have to do light, even washes from the beginning and then build up on that. Because I realized when I went to go paint on hot press paper, that's what I was trying to do, and it doesn't blend out how that paper works. So it doesn't like transition from dark to light. It kind of becomes really, I don't know, streaky or something. But again, if you are one who really likes to do even washes from the get-go, start light and build up, doing really even washes across the whole thing, then give that a try. Okay. And now is kind of where you like take a step back, see if there's any adjustments. That was step 4 we finished. Now we're on the very last one. Maybe you're gonna take this time to do another layer. For me, I'm just gonna touch up a few things. There's a lot of different strokes here. I kind of want to smooth that out, so I'm just taking a damp brush, smoothing out some of those hard lines. Same over here. I'm just going to kind of work this a little bit. And sometimes the painting works with me and the paint moves, and sometimes it's like, nope, this is where my line is, this is where I'm standing, and I say, okay. When you're painting things like this and building form slowly, it gets hard to really see what's going on. So please step back from this before you make a decision on it, because there might be some blooms or texture lines that are really throwing you when you're this close to it. Put your painting far away and see if they still stick out.
Or have someone else look at it.
Yeah, have someone else look at it. Be careful though, because sometimes it's really heartbreaking when you're like really proud of something and then you're like, look at what I did. And then they're like, yeah, that's all right. And you're like, oh, which is why we do things for us. You know what I mean? We can't rely on other people to help us feel good about what we do. That's why it's okay to say, I like what I did here. Okay, that feels good. This, I'm going to blend out a little bit more. And then this one I'm going to blend out a little bit more, and then I think I'm going to call that good. Blend out while simultaneously adding a light wash. Just needed to have a little bit darker thing going on here. Okay. I think we're good. Gosh.
It's gorgeous.
I love it. Okay. I hope you guys had fun with this painting and learned a lot. If you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. If you want us to see what you made, I would love to see it. You can tag us on Instagram at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art. We have a Facebook group that's for the sole purpose of you guys being able to share what you're creating. It's really big. It's almost 50,000 members. So it's just fun to go in there, learn from other people, see what they're doing with their own projects. It's a great place to ask questions if you're a beginner, things like that. So that's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. Thank you guys for taking the time to paint with me and hang out with my son and my husband. Sorry, my son's smiling right now. It's so cute. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.